Okay, good evening everybody. It's great to see you all here today and to welcome you to the annual address. For those of you that don't know, I'm Mike Hanna. It's my privilege to be the director of the Institute. I particularly want to welcome our guest speaker, Dame Anne Johnson, who's kindly agreed to come and talk to us this evening, President of the Academy. I'm also very pleased to welcome Geraint Rees, Vice Provost, Research, Innovation and Global. Don't know where he's here somewhere. There he is. That's great. So very nice to see you, but also nice to see all of you face to face after such a long time online. So it's tradition that I try and give a bit of a review of the year over the next 20 minutes, which I'll try to do. Thank you everyone for the hundreds of slides you've sent me. I've tried to distill it down a bit. Of course, the last couple of years has really been dominated by COVID. And actually, we had to cancel 4 times the normal get-togethers we have to thank Institute staff twice a year for all that they do. So I was really pleased that finally we did manage to come together in July. And I just right from the beginning, I want to really thank all staff, all students, all professional services, all clinical academics, non-clinical academics, everybody for the really hard work you've put in over the past 2 years during the pandemic and the way in which you've supported each other. It's been really, really fantastic. So a big thank you from me. I also, just at the beginning, want to particularly thank our fantastic Institute manager, Helen, who puts up with a lot, as you know, and she does a fantastic job, and all the deputy Institute directors who've worked really hard in the last year or so. And of course our central professional services team and all our departmental managers, and especially to thank Sandra and Navida for all the work that they do. We get great support from the faculty office, from Alan and the team, and I think over the pandemic we've worked even more closely right across the faculty with many colleagues indicated here. So a big thank you to everybody. So Institute colleagues and PIs have contributed significantly, I think, to knowledge about COVID-19 and the brain. So 25 of our PIs have been directly involved in research on COVID. We've produced about 145 publications, and these have ranged from topics like assay development, medicinal chemistry, genome projects, as well as colleagues being represented on SAGE and other national advisory boards. The first paper produced from Queen Square was this one in Brain, which was really at the very beginning of the pandemic from Ross Patterson and colleagues, and really turned out to be very accurate in terms of the brain and neurological phenotypes associated with COVID, and has been very highly cited. And colleagues have continued to produce many different publications on different aspects of brain and neurological disease related to COVID. And many of the colleagues in this room have appeared in all sorts of media outlets commenting on COVID and making a contribution to knowledge in this area. One really interesting development was some of our clinical academics had to pivot the way they delivered care and had to innovate. And Alex Leff and Nick Ward with the rehab team developed a very innovative online rehabilitation system which really took off and actually now has been commissioned by the NHS as a new way of delivering this type of therapy, which is really fantastic, and that was in partnership with the charity Same You. Despite the pandemic, you were all pretty busy writing papers, and you published more than in any previous year, with over 2,000 publications, which is quite amazing, with 85 in what I consider to be some of the leading journals, which is a great achievement. GP Schiava made this slide for me earlier today, which just gives you a sense of the metrics. These are publications from the Institute in the last 12 months across a range of COVID and other neurological conditions. It's really quite impressive. So I'm pleased to say that we've got more current active grants than we've ever had, with £365 million, and this has steadily increased over the past years, as our contribution, which is obviously very important to keep going. I tried to design this slide so you couldn't quite read the names, but I'm not sure if that's worked. So we've had over £1 million. We've had 9 awards in the last 12 months alone, and over 500,000, 14 awards. So that's really an incredible achievement, and congratulations to all these colleagues listed here. The REF was a great success for UCL in general, and particularly good for the Institute of Neurology as part of the Faculty of Brain Sciences, with 92% of our research graders 4-star or 3-star, which is again a very strong achievement. So despite the pandemic, we managed to have our sort of science away day so that we could refresh and renew our own strategic plan and to try and contribute to the university's development of a strategic plan. All 8 departments and all members of all departments contributed to this process, which I think was very interesting, and it went on for a few months overall, and we did finalise our document, which is on the website, and it's kind of no surprise that this is what we're all about, and it's sort of embodied in our document. So we're really obviously doing research to try and deeply understand the brain in health and disease. I think our USP is that we want to actively translate that knowledge into prevention, into diagnostics and into therapies, and obviously train the next generation. We're always actively seeking to have impact from our research and our activities, whether that's locally, nationally or internationally, and always driving to try and improve our culture and remain financially and of course carbon sustainable is really key. That came out very strongly in the discussions around our strategic plan. So translation, being a really key aspect of what we do, is greatly helped by this fantastic experimental neurology centre that we have, the Leonard Wolfson Centre, led by Vincenzo Libri. And this has really gone from strength to strength in recent years, with many clinical studies, both PI-led and commercial-led, first-in-man studies, genetic therapy studies, are all happening in this incredible unit. And Vincenzo now leads the CRF for the whole of UCLH and was successful in getting that renewed for £10 million for a further 5-year cycle, which is obviously very good. Another big success was the UCLH application for its BRC to be renewed. This was a highly competitive process across the whole of England, and only 2 BRCs were awarded 90 million, which is what UCLH was awarded. So a really massive achievement in a very complicated landscape. And 2 of these are based here at Queen's Square, which have a value of about 13 million together over the next 5 years. The dementia one is led by Nick Fox with Selena Ray and colleagues indicated here. And the translational neuroscience one is led by Olga with colleagues shown here. And so we're looking forward to working on translational strategies going forward with both those BRCs locally. Dimitri Kuhlman is our Deputy Director for Enterprise and Translation, and we're really trying to push and promote awareness. We have so much discovery going on. I don't think we're really fully maximising our ability to translate and seek enterprise opportunities. In fact, just today we had a great Advanced Genetics Therapy Symposium before this meeting, just showcasing some of the great gene therapy research going on. And we've appointed a Senior Translational Research Manager to work closely with PIs at the Institute and to link in with the Translational Research Office to try and have a more bespoke support for translating our basic science into taking it forward towards translation. I think one of the real strengths of the Institute is gene discovery. So as you know, people like John Hardy, Henry Holden, Nick Wood have made many gene discoveries, but there's really an opportunity, I think, for us to move into genetic therapy space, and I think that that's already starting to happen. with examples illustrated here. And I think this is a huge area for neurology over the next 10 years, and I'm hoping that the Institute can play a very significant role. And to support this further, we've established a genetic therapy accelerator jointly with Great Ormond Street, which is headed up by Francesco Montoni, to try and help PIs locally and have more expertise in the preclinical space in genetic therapies. Of course, everything we do depends on partnerships, particularly our translation, and all of these partnerships illustrated here are crucially important and valued. And we have obviously a long-standing partnership with the hospital, which is a major benefit in enabling our translation. And we have important partnerships with charities and philanthropy, and we work really closely with them, and we're really grateful for all of the support they give us in different ways, and they're illustrated here. I'm sure many of you know these colleagues. So I'm going to try now to just give you a few highlights of what's happened in terms of research over the past year. I apologise to those colleagues that I haven't included their research, but I'm just trying to give you a flavour of what's been going on. So we have 8 research departments, which are the powerhouse of our research, led by 5 women and 4 men, and they all do a great job. All the departments really span discovery through to translation research. So just going through some examples, Martina heads up the imaging neuroscience department. Here's an example of Eleanor Maguire's research looking at conduction velocity of white matter tracks as a key factor in autobiographical memory. Carl Friston often has really interesting and thought-provoking areas of research. So here's some work in which he shows how in vitro neural cultures can learn to interact with their world, leading to some interesting BBC news items illustrated here. And we have a really strong research program in the Max Planck Center led by Ray, and this publication in Nature maps brain volumes across the entire human lifespan. Our neuromuscular department has a major focus on ALS, and we have a really strong now motor neuron disease center. Has an annual symposium, and there's been both basic science discoveries and translational activities, some of them illustrated here. Probably the most important basic science discovery published in Nature was from Pietro Fratta, who showed that TDP43 pathology induces an abnormal splicing event in this synaptic gene, which seems to be a key discovery in the pathogenesis of ALS, which has been actively pursued. Brain repair, there's a heavy focus on stroke research led by Dave Waring and his team. Here's an example of some criteria to define cerebral amyloid angiopathy published in Lancet Neurology. And a really innovative piece of work from Alex Leff relates to the demonstration that intensive aphasia therapy, speech therapy approaches, has a dramatically improved outcome. Normally in the NHS, I think people get about 8 sessions of this type of therapy, but they demonstrated that an intensive course of 100 hours of this type of therapy had definite benefits, which is really important for the NHS and in developing better services. The functional neurosurgery group is part of the brain repair department. It's an important partnership between the hospital and the institute, and they've just developed a new innovation, which is MRI guided focused ultrasound, and this turns out to be an effective non-invasive treatment for essential tremor that's resistant to other treatments. And so you can see here an example of a patient, June, who's had this therapy, and the effect on her ability to write is really quite significant. Our movement neuroscience department is extremely strong. Here are 2 examples of some basic science publications from Rowan De Silva and Sonia Gandhi. It's also great news that Tony Shapiro has secured £5.5 million to initiate a phase 3 trial of ambroxol in GBA mutation Parkinson's disease. So that's a major achievement. Primary human mitochondrial disease research spans departments, and I'm delighted this is now being spearheaded by Antonella and Rob Pitt-Caithley, and they've made some really interesting discoveries. One example is the ability of a small molecule 2-deoxy-D-glucose to inhibit replication of mutant mitochondrial DNA in cells, so pushing up the wild type proportion, which has significant therapeutic potential and is going into a clinical trial. Neurodegeneration is really strong. This department, led by Nick Fox and Sarah Tabrizi, with the labs indicated here, and the Dementia Research Centre is part of that, and many successes in the last year. So congratulations to Ramona Weil, who secured a Wellcome Career Development Award. Lots of translational research going on, clinical trials using the incredible cohorts they have. And of course we have a really strong HD centre led by Sarah Tabrizi, and indeed this was one of the impact cases in the REF, particularly the work which included the world's first in-human phase 1b/2a ASO trial in Huntington's, which led to lots of new learning. We do host also the UK Dementia Research Institute, part of the network of 6 as part of the National Dementia Research Initiative. This is led by Karen Duff, and she successfully led the quinquennial review and the refunding for the next 5-year period. And I'd also just like to particularly make mention of Bart de Strooper. So he led this initiative for the past 6 years as the national director and was based at UCL. He's standing down in a year and has done a fantastic job in setting up this national initiative. And here are just some examples of the really high quality fundamental discovery science that they do at the UCL part of the Dementia Research Institute. So epilepsy is also incredibly strong at the Institute. Both clinical research and also gene therapy research is world leading. Just earlier today in the Genetics Symposium, Gabriele Lignani talked about this incredible, elegant research in which he's developed a gene therapy approach to specifically suppress neurons that are overactive in epilepsy. So a kind of very specific tailored therapy, which is really exciting and was published in Science just recently. And on the clinical side, John Duncan has been instrumental in developing a new approach, which is a laser interstitial thermal therapy to ablate deep-seated lesions which are not surgically amenable but are driving epilepsy. And I understand this is in advanced stages of discussions for it to be commissioned as an NHS service. Inflammation and MS is led by Olga. They have strong groups looking at biomarkers and imaging. And in that group, Jeremy Chataway is leading really innovative trial design, the so-called multi-arm, multi-stage adaptive trial design for trying multiple therapies at the same time in groups of patients with MS. And I think this is a very important innovation. So switching to other aspects of what the Institute is focusing on. So Sanjay Sisodia is the Deputy Director for Climate Change. He's really been pushing forward in 3 areas. He was involved in a whole article of the Glasgow Herald about climate change in the brain, a whole edition to coincide with COP26. He's also promoting research in different aspects of climate change, and we've been taking action, trying to get our -80 freezers down to -70, and we've agreed a restriction in travel to use rail rather than flying for for these sort of geographic distributions near Europe and in the UK. And I want to thank Steffi for her incredible work sort of leading on sustainability. We've had many awards across the different departments from the UCL Sustainability Award schemes. And similarly, I want to thank Helen Plume-Favreau for her work in EDI. We now have 91 members of staff directly involved in EDI work. That's 12% of the whole institute. And these colleagues are really working hard to advance many areas of EDI, which is really important. Here's some examples of their initiatives, which they're spearheading. So promotions, we've had a lot of success in senior promotions. I won't read all the names, but congratulations to all these colleagues promoted to professor, and these colleagues promoted to associate professor and principal research fellow. And importantly, we've had a lot of success in our early career promotions with colleagues illustrated here who've all been successful in their promotions, so well done to them. So this was a great achievement. Our colleague John Hardy, who's in the room, is now been knighted Knight Bachelor for his services to human health in the New Year's Honours List. So congratulations to John. I think he's wearing his medal. I'm not sure where he is, but that's a fabulous achievement. And individual awards, congratulations to all these colleagues. So Nick Fox awarded the Grand Prix European Prize for Alzheimer's Research. Gippy Schiavo received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Turin Academy of Science. Kathy Price elected to be a Fellow of the British Academy. 2 new members elected to be Fellows of the Academy of Medical Sciences, Sebastian Brandner and Karen Duff. And of course Sarah Tabrizi received the Osler Medal as well as the HDSA Research Award. So congratulations to all of them. Many of you will recognise Libby Bertram. After 30 years service as HR manager, she retired in December. I understand she's very happily retired and not missing filling out HR forms, so that's good. I also want to particularly thank Paul Whiting, who led with distinction the Drug Discovery Institute, which was set up by Paul in 2015 and has been really successful. He stood down just in June, and I want to welcome Fiona Randall, who's now taken on leadership of that. So no annual address would be complete without an update on the building. So the building, we started in 2011. We're getting closer now. We've just got 18 months to go. We've, thanks to many different people, we've almost got all of the money. The building has, of course, started and is well on the way. I think what's really exciting, actually, and I think it's going to be really great for students, for staff, for patients, is the environment that we're going to create. We've coined this term dual hub for translational research. So as you know, at the new building end, that's predominantly going to be our wet lab preclinical science, but then we have a major continuing presence at the Queen Square end of this with clinical trials facilities, the Wolfson facility that I've mentioned. We've just completed an extension to the Wolfson facility, and we have plans and provisional funding approved for an advanced therapy centre, allowing us to do what's called BSL2 category gene therapy, which we hope to open in 2024. So I think this is going to be a really exciting environment to work in, and hopefully it's going to advance our knowledge of these diseases and therapies. So here we go, a few pictures of the site. So this was November. This is the Gray's Inn Road site, mainly in the ground. But then quite quickly, these are recent pictures now. It's up to the 2nd floor. It's a massive operation, actually. It's quite impressive if you go and have a look at it. We did the time capsule burial. Helen did that in earlier in May. And we've had rooftop tours, and which is very exciting. We've held our executive committee meeting there once or twice. These are some artists' impressions of what it's going to look like. As you see, there'll be no traffic on Gray's Inn Road. So, of course, above all, it's a partnership between UCLH. There will be outpatient services there, There'll be all our science from the wet lab science predominantly from the Institute and the DRI, and the DRI national headquarters will be based there. A really key development is we're going to have core facilities where we're sharing high-tech equipment, which will be a much more efficient way to operate, and we believe will connect colleagues in different ways, as illustrated here. And this is an important part of the new building. There's a whole arts program around the building, which is very exciting, and many of you are involved. So the building is all on target and so far on budget, Geraint. So that's good. Education is really important, and I just want to thank Alex and the team illustrated here for all that work they do driving our education programs, which is predominantly MSc and PhD. It's grown a lot in the last 10 years, and this is the wider education team who really are committed to giving students the best possible experience. There have been many scholarships awarded in the last year, so I just want to congratulate all of these colleagues on different scholarships indicated. And there's a whole raft of MSc prizes that we award. We have some really fantastic MSc students, and so congratulations to all of these students for their achievements. So one of the prizes that's got a long history at Queen Square is the Queen Square Essay Prize, and this year it's been awarded to Kanza Tariq for her project essay described here. Oh, I've gone further. Well, I'm not going to give you an essay prize. So I think Kanza is here, I understand, so I'm just going to give her a secret envelope. Yeah, I haven't got an envelope for you, I'm afraid. So now I'm really, really pleased and honoured to introduce Dame Anne Johnson. She is, of course, President of the Academy of Medical Sciences, Professor of Infectious Disease, Epidemiology, and Co-Director of UCL Public Health. It's really great that she's agreed to come and talk to us this evening and give the annual address. So if you'd like to come up and give the annual address, that would be great. I'll just...
I couldn't win an essay prize. I could just about put the slides up. So thank you very much, Mike. It's really nice to be here this evening. Thanks very much for the invitation. I've been at UCL more years than I care to remember, and I'm always reminded when coming to talk to colleagues that we are such an enormously broad community, and it was wonderful, Mike, to hear from you about all the achievements in the last year or two. I mean, it's fantastic, and I think when I come to talk to the Academy, one of the things that we're trying to impress on the entire community is the importance of working together across a range of disciplines, and it's really impressive to see, in one area of science, how many or one specialty, how many different groups are coming together to work together. So I really enjoyed hearing what you've done. Mike asked me to talk not on an area of research, but actually on an area of science strategy. As Mike has been on the Council of the Academy of Medical Sciences the last 4 years and has been incredibly important in the work we've been doing in developing our own strategy and our relationship with the broader science community. So today he asked me to talk about the work of the Academy. I realised as President of the Academy, which I took up in the middle of the pandemic and might not have done if I hadn't been an infectious disease epidemiologist, but tough, I was in either the wrong place at the right time or the right place at the wrong time, I'm not sure. But I've been in that role for the last 2 years, and it's been a really fascinating experience to be working in areas of policy, science development, and indeed whole areas of developing the scientists of the future, which I think is actually one of the core roles of the Academy. And I wanted to talk about our thinking about where the Academy is going. But one thing I did realise, that although we were beginning to work much more with the public, particularly through the pandemic, the public we were not that engaged with was in a sense the community we work with. A lot of people don't really know what the national academies do. So this is my sales pitch to you all, to tell you what we are doing, and also to talk about how people can get involved and how we would like to support the future generation of scientists. We did actually develop our strategy this year, and I'll be talking about that. But for those of you who don't know what the Academy is or know something about it, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about what we think our strengths are. We are one of the 4 national academies alongside the Royal Society, the British Academy and the Royal Academy of Engineers. We work very closely amongst one another, working particularly on science policy and actually develop a lot of work together. But you probably know, and there are a number of fellows I know here in the room, that we have a fellowship of the most influential scientists in the UK and worldwide. There are about 1,400 fellows. 10% of them actually come from UCL, and I think there'll be a number here at the Institute. And so we really do want to engage that community. Getting a fellowship at the Academy is a real marker of esteem, but actually, Mike, we've talked about developing a job description. We're very keen that it's not just a badge that a set of letters after your name, but actually a community of scientists to work together for the benefit of the wider science community. So we do try to build connections across the academy, across charities, industry, and across the NHS. We work with Europe, we work globally, and increasingly work with patients and the public. And we set as our strategic or our vision statement, I suppose, making medical sciences work for everyone. And I want to say a bit about what that's all about. Good health relies on both a very wide range of disciplines, of which certainly what goes on in the NHS is only a part. I come from public health. We're very broadly influenced, delighted to see the work you're doing on climate change, by the environments in which we live, on our health. And really we want to engage that broad sector in improving health of people everywhere. And we've set out a number of priorities and values that I'll talk about. So I want to talk about 3 areas of work that I've been involved in trying to be open and progressive in the research sector. There are 3 things that I think we're in trying to do is to improve the environment for research, improve the opportunities for people going forward, and to work with a much wider community. So I'll talk about 3 things: policy, people, and communication, and tell you a bit about what we've been up to. And when we think about our strategy going forward, some of the things we're trying to do is to improve lives, and that means not just patients, but public and communities, strengthen research over a very wide biomedical and health research base, and in the current political scenario also, to look at our global competitiveness. Our relationship with Europe is very important, but actually our relationship with the science community globally is equally important. We'll support researchers. I'll tell you more about our global work, and we have to be sustainable going forward. So there is a question about how we are funded going forward, and I won't touch on that, but actually it's a very important thing that we maintain our independence. A lot of our funding does come from government, but actually academies need, very important that we have an independent voice, independent of government, and are able to base everything we say on scientific evidence. So I've enjoyed the challenge of trying to influence policy. The Academy does a great deal of work on policy. A lot of it is behind the scenes. You don't necessarily see it. It's quiet diplomacy, often working with government departments, and often also working more publicly. We produce a range of major policy reports. I'll say something about those. We do a lot of workshops. I hope many of you have been involved with those. Increasingly, we want those workshops not just to involve our fellows, but to involve younger scientists and early career research leaders. Quite a lot of time is spent. You can see some of the work we've done just this year in writing. For example, there's a letter there from me on investing in science to the Times. Just a couple of weeks ago, we managed to convene the academies, but also a range of research funders, to warn about the potential if the government didn't stick to its commitments of maintaining its investment in research, the impacts that would have more broadly on health and the economy. And that letter went to the Chancellor, and you will know now that in the autumn statement just last week, mercifully, the science budget was protected, at least for the coming year or so. And that was, really a lot of work. I'm not sure to what extent we take credit for that, but there was a lot of work by the science community to speak with one voice, and that's very much one of the spaces that we're working in. Many of you I know will have work with Horizon Europe. We are still in discussions about Horizon Europe, as you know, with our European colleagues, but it has been really incredible to be able to work with other academies in Europe who have been very supportive of our continued cry to really remain associated with Horizon Europe, and those negotiations continue. I'll say more about that. And of course, in doing those policy work, a lot of that has also involved a lot of public communication, and I found myself spending rather more time doing that in the 2 years of the pandemic than I might like to have spent doing, but that is all part of the job, doing quite a lot of media work. Say more about that. And in influencing policy, we do want our work to extend beyond simple, just clinical areas, but also to think some of the wider health challenges, which include health inequalities and climate change, and global health security. These are issues which I can see you're also addressing here in the Institute. We've also see ensuring research in the NHS as an absolute priority. It's really extraordinary what you've achieved in terms of the BRC in here at UCL and in the associated medical community and in the NHS. But actually maintaining that commitment to science in the NHS is in itself a strategic challenge. So again, the Academy was involved in working with partners, including the ABPI, in getting the legislation changed to make sure that research was an explicit responsibility of the NHS in the new Health and Social Care Act. We'll focus more on prevention and on bringing communities together. Our policy reports, this is one that we produced at record speed during the pandemic and was commissioned by Patrick Vallance when he asked the Academy as chief scientist to collate evidence on the possible scenarios for winters in 2021 and in 2021-22. And we did warn, we weren't believed at the time, but we warned about the resurgence of COVID-19 in 2020-21. And we did that by bringing really a very wide range of voices together across the Academy and a wide range of early career researchers and the public to inform that report. It was very widely used across government. And you can see here Keir Starmer, the day after we published it, actually at Prime Minister's Question Times. I had to sort of remember who was the Prime Minister then. It was Boris Johnson. And he stood up in the House and he threw the report on the dispatch box, I think it's called, and said, have you read the report? So it is really, we do try to ensure that our research is evidence-based, as our reports are evidence-based, but they're used very widely for policy, and we've had the opportunity to present these sort of reviews across government into different government departments, the Cabinet Office and so on, work closely with ONS and others. And I think the Academy's really key advantage is to being able to provide that sort of independent evidence to government and to bring many communities together without and keeping a very broad view of the science and the challenges that remain. This is another one that I chaired in 2016, which was on the future of public health, which is my own area. This again was very much informed by scientific research and really challenged the funders to invest more in transdisciplinary research to improve the health of the public. We have since that time seen greater coordination of public health research, and I think we're now very much aware of some of the deficits in investment in population health, which were really laid bare during the pandemic. And we've been working again to try and look at the structures, the new structures for public health in the UK, and to work with those communities to ensure that there is a very strong evidence base for population health. That is something which, again, we had a working group in the Academy which brought all the major players together the research community with the practice community and the national and local structures to discuss the evidence base for population health going forward and for global health security. I think dear to many hearts in this room, and I know this is a particular issue for some of our clinical colleagues in neurology, is the NHS academia interface. And we were struck during the pandemic. We did a lot of work to support younger researchers because I imagine here, although you did an incredible amount during COVID, a lot of people's research, clinical research, was disrupted during COVID. A lot of trials ran into trouble. The Academy did a lot to support communities of researchers, to work with funders to make sure that there was facility for account to be taken of interruptions due to COVID in their research. And we have done a lot of work to try and really improve the interface and to improve to try and improve clinical academic careers going forward. You're probably aware there is a decline in the number of clinical academics in recent years, and they are becoming, on average, older. So there is a real challenge to us as a community now to ensure that the next generation can go forward. We wouldn't have seen the clinical response, the clinical academic response to COVID, or our capability to produce vaccines and treatments if there hadn't been the previous investment right across the range of science, from the very basic stuff that you do here through the translational stuff, through the clinical trials, all of which are represented in the Institute. And it's that long-term investment, of course, which allows you to respond in an emergency, but also to improve health in the long run. And that has been, very much at the heart of our work. This was led by the previous president, Robert Lechler, but we continue to work closely in that field. And the focus areas from that report will be familiar with you, of valuing research in the healthcare system, of integrating research and in academia and the NHS. That's even more challenging as we try to recover from the pandemic, ensuring an undergraduate curricula which enables people to engage in research and streamlining the way we do our research. All those were at the heart of that report. And we've continued to implement the activity. We're working directly with the Department of Health on their recovery and resilience, and trying to, as I've already told you, try to influence legislation and investment in the entire research ecosystem to ensure that we have a really healthy research community going forward. But that is going to be a challenge. And as I've said, we were able to influence the Health and Care Act, and we are doing more work in this area, which I shall come to shortly. Another big area of our work is to try and bring different communities together. This is the forum which brings together academia, the NHS and industry, and we have a range of meetings. We were in Liverpool just a month ago, Mike was there, where we had a hybrid meeting, and we brought the forum together to discuss areas of genomic medicine and intervention. And here we are in Liverpool, and that also signals something else. I mean, I've said that there is a high proportion of our fellows are from London, Oxford, Cambridge, and we strive very much to be a UK community. And we're very aware from my own virtual tour of the country, which I did during the pandemic, couldn't do it in person, we did it online, that the engagement of the Academy is much stronger in London than it is in the rest of the country. And so we had our first council meeting in Liverpool in the new spine, if you've been to of the College of Physicians. It's a fantastic building. We had a great meeting, and it was really good to engage with our colleagues across a whole range of areas while we were there. And we'll be doing more of that as we go forward. And in fact, we launched our strategy. I gave a lecture in Belfast on the day of the launch of our strategy, where we actually have very few fellows, and we want to work much more closely. And so when I come to geography, let me turn now to our global health activity. Before I became president, I was vice president international. There are again enormous challenges with respect to international collaboration. There was quite rightly an outcry last year from maybe more than a year ago now, but from the academic community when there were real cuts into global health grants. But we are now again working on new strategies for for working internationally, not just with Europe, but more broadly in many countries of the world. And actually that is a really, really important way of not only improving global health security, but of diplomacy and of maintaining relationships which often gone on for decades, which have really changed lives at scale in many parts of the world. And I'm sure you too, I know, have many research collaborations around the world. So this is very important to us. In fact, the team has just come back from South Africa. You can see the picture right at the top there was a meeting on mental health in Johannesburg, global mental health, with colleagues coming from all over Africa to participate in that meeting. We have been working very closely with the National Academy of Medicine. Victor Zhao this year gave the international lecture at the Academy on the future of medical education, really, as much as anything. But we had the privilege of going out to Washington in July, where we held a hybrid meeting with many of colleagues in London to save the carbon footprint, and a few of us in Washington, where we agreed to continue our memorandum of understanding, but also particularly to have a meeting on tackling climate change mitigation and human health. We published this report jointly with the Royal Society to coincide with COP26, which looked at the health co-benefits primarily of climate change mitigation on a global scale. That was led by Andy Haynes, who's a fellow of the Academy, and colleagues from the Royal Society. So that association with the US, where we've chosen the topic of climate change, but we hope that we will work much more closely with that Academy on many of the global problems that we face. I've said something about our links with Europe. Whatever the outcome of Horizon Europe Association, we will continue to work very closely with European colleagues, including if Plan B comes into play. That will all be about trying to maintain those links in the long run. And we work on that with the Federation of European Academies of Medicine and other international organisations, and those are really sort of critical to maintaining those long-term associations. Let me turn then to people, because I think there are quite a few people in this room who are at stages of their career when it can be very difficult to see the longer path ahead. The Academy has been very involved in trying to set secure career pathways in place. And I should say, I have been mentioning clinical academics a lot, but 50% of our fellows are not clinical. And I really want to emphasise that we like to see our researchers going right across the spectrum, from very basic discovery research in the laboratory right up the kind of global interventions and population health interventions I've mentioned. And so we support researchers across the entire career spectrum. And I think a lot of people don't realise this. We go right back into the undergraduate phase with our Inspire programme for medical students, and then we have career development awards, we have starter grants for clinical lecturers, and we have a whole range of activities which go right across the career spectrum. But I think the big focus for us in this is really people at the earlier stages of their careers, in fostering not just their science, but actually many other aspects of career possibilities, leadership opportunities, and I'll say something about these. Some of you may have been recipients of starter grants for clinical lecturers. These are for people who have already got an established clinical lecturer post, an opportunity to get some pump priming from their work, which is often very difficult. You know, people struggle when they get these clinical lectureships to bring in a big grant. This is an opportunity for pump priming. The next round, the last round's opened in July, but they come up every year, and I think have really helped sort of push forward people's careers. This is our new cohort of Sustain awardees. And this is about really the topic, Mark, you've addressed, which is diversity and inclusion and careers for women, and brings this group together, which really they comprise a learning set, and in addition to being able to get support for their careers, they also get support, for example, in media training, which was held last week, and there they are talking about that on Twitter. We have a flyer program, which is the next stage up. And this has been a really exciting success. This is funded by a philanthropist and has brought together people from a range of different backgrounds, some from industry, some from clinical work, some from non-clinical research, and to bring them together as future leaders. So this is the next stage in their career, and there's a big focus in this quite small group and highly selected group to really look at cross-sector working between industry, academe, and the clinical environment. And this is a really amazing group of people. I met them last month, and they really end up actually very often working together and developing all sorts of innovations and enterprise together. So if there are people in your teams or people that you feel might be put forward this, please do look into that. That's been a very exciting programme. We now had a mentoring programme. I don't know how many people have been involved in that in the Institute, but all our fellows have the opportunity to mentor others. One of my mentees has just become a flyer, which is kind of nice. And so I think it's an exciting programme. I think about 2,000 mentor-mentee pairs have been involved in this, and it's been going for over 20 years. We hope we might export that. We have been exporting that to other countries around the world to kind of set up the same programmes. And I think for those of you who've been involved in this can often be quite life-changing for people's careers. The important things about mentors is they're people who they're interested in their mentee, but they're kind of independent of them and able to advise them more broadly about their careers. I know that there are all sorts of concerns, and I'm returning here to clinical training, but to remind you, some of these other programmes go right across the range, that we are involved with the Clinical Academic Training Forum. The Clinical Academic Training Forum was set up because of the complexity of all the routes into training to bring together medics, vets, midwives, and allied health professionals. It's chaired by Paul Stewart, who is our clinical vice president, and it really is trying to improve the career pathways for clinical academics. I know because I have had several letters from fellows, particularly in this discipline, concerned about the pathways and the complexities of the pathways, and key to this has been trying to build in flexibility into the training programme, which I know can be interpreted differently by different people, but Paul is working very hard in this area to try and ease the pathways for people, and working with the funders on trying to see if we can't develop better career security for people in a number of career pathways. We're very aware of the I don't know what it is. It's the cliff that arises at the end of your when you come out of training, having been through clinical lectureships, clinical training fellowships, to a secure long-term post. And that's not just true in clinical research; it's also in non-clinical research. So we are working hard on that. Finally, to communications, we really do want to work to communicate with our own community in research, but also to work with patients and the public to involve them in our work. Although I think, as I've said, we have our own house to set in order for our own community to know what we have to offer. And we really have quite a large comms team now who work on our digital communications and on a range of social media campaigns. And to give you the ideas of some of the things we do, I've told you about some of our reactive media statements. We do a lot of media work. I was slightly horrified to realise that during the pandemic I participated in something like 180 interviews or something, which was quite a lot, and it's not my favourite job, but comes with the territory. And I think there is a whole debate now, which is one we have to have, when during the pandemic so many people had to move out of their comfort zones and to communicate more broadly with the public. That's set up a whole, as you know, debate about how we communicate science, actually how we communicate uncertainty in science, and how we engage with the public in trust in science. the public do actually trust scientists more, or came to trust scientists more during the pandemic, but they rightfully ask questions, and they rightfully ask questions about whether we had asked the right questions. And I think sometimes we were too certain in our communications to allay anxiety and not to say the things we knew, the things we didn't know, and the things we were trying to find out. And I think, therefore, we all have a responsibility in that place. We've offered a lot of coaching to people to increase the diversity of expert voices. We worked a lot with different communities. We worked closely with Fiona Fox at the Science Media Centre, who's one of our honorary fellows, who has been a real force for good in trying to improve that area, but interested to hear people's reflections on how we improve that space. These are some of the many outlets that we've been involved in. Many of the major outlets on the in the national newspapers, national news outlets. Although I sometimes wonder whether that we should not be doing an awful lot more on social media and so on, which is where a lot of other people now are picking up their information. But we also, in developing our strategy reports and our policy reports, work with the public directly. And we were one of the few organisations during the pandemic to actually engage with a group of people who helped us and produced their own report alongside our winter reports. And we heard from a range of voices. And I think that really did alter the way we perceived the pandemic, because we heard from patients affected by COVID, and we heard from young people who were not so much affected by being infected, but affected because their lives were really severely affected by the pandemic, socially and educationally in so many other ways. So we did actually produce a People's Perspective article, and we have been quite clear in our advice on the COVID inquiry that it needs to have a strong people's and patients' voice in that environment. And I think that has may well be more public voices. We ran also a comic which was led by our comms team. This was a comic about Divock 91, and you will figure out actually that is COVID-19 backwards, very rapidly amongst a group of neuroscientists, I should think. No, okay. But this was great, and the group, these young people who ran this comic, and who we talked to, and we went and they managed to go and talk at Indie Sage and things like that. They were really fascinating because they said, look, you paid a lot of attention to the elderly and frail because they die of COVID. You pay attention to a whole range of people, but you don't pay attention to our lives. And actually, they were really very vocal about this and very engaged with it. We also tackled another difficult topic, that of death and dying. This was before the pandemic, but this was an installation in a shopping centre in Lewisham. It's now been extended to a number of other places called the Departure Lounge. And it's all about the conversation that we find very difficult to have about death and dying. And this was actually, we got many thousands of people going through this installation, and it was an opportunity to talk about a very difficult topic, I think, about how we manage the end of life, not just terminal care, but the very end of life, but broadly the whole preparation for the end of our lives. And that was what all that was about, and we continue in that work. So in the future, we need both for the Academy to be more reflective of the society we live in. I think I've talked about geography, but we should also talk about expertise and backgrounds, and we need to build the kind of transdisciplinarity which I think you demonstrate here in science and in evidence. We'll obviously go on in policy and influencing careers, but that's perhaps the thing that collectively as a fellowship, because we are a fellowship, I think the fellowship has a responsibility to the next generation to ensure that they have the best possible opportunities to influence, the health and wealth of the nation and more broadly, and to continue our outreach. But there's work to be done. The fellowship is 25% female historically, and now we're electing about a third women fellows each year. But you've shown some of your diversity figures here. There are many other areas of diversity we need to address, and that includes discipline, and it includes, as I've shown you here, the geography as well. And so it's really important that we really work on that EDI agenda as we go forward. And there are huge challenges which, as a community, we have to address. It is, I think, good news that we've managed to at least the government's maintained their commitment to investment in R&D, but in the long term, we need to increase that further. The Academy has seen it as part of its role to be working alongside the government in developing proposals with UKRI should whether Horizon does or doesn't go ahead, whether or not we manage to associate. It's incredibly important that we work to maintain that investment and to make sure that the promised investment is really invested in the most appropriate schemes to ensure long-term international collaboration, but it remains the position that association would be the best outcome. And more generally, we are going to have to make sure that we enhance the coordination of health research right across the UK and address many of the issues of inequalities and health more broadly. We've got a new cross-sector scheme which will connect industry, academia and the NHS, and we are working on long-term sustainability of health research. Here's the new cross-sector scheme which is going to be run in hubs across the UK, bringing people together to promote health innovation. If you want to know more about it, you can listen to Jackie Hunter on YouTube. And we also have this new programme on sustainability of health research. This will be one of our big policy reports, chaired by Julia Goodfellow and Peter Matheson. And again, this has involved really consultation with a range of groups, workshops on a whole range of areas. You can see there financial stability, sustainability rather, early career researchers, and a bunch of work on patient and public involvement and public dialogue. So all our work in the future will always involve public dialogue. This report will be published in 2023. It builds on the work that was done on the academia NHS interface, and will go across this whole range of people, workforce and culture, cross-sector mobility, research in the NHS and financial stability. So watch out for that in early 2023. This is really about the landscape in which we all work, and I think all of us have to work to ensure that going forward. We don't hear enough of the voices of young people. I don't think we hear enough of the voices of young scientists. The academies are working together now on the new UK Young Academy. That is a new interdisciplinary organisation. It's going to be going across all disciplines. The applications actually closed for the first group in September this year, and I know that we had an incredible response. This will be a young academy in the long run, run by that young academy, and I hope will really kind of stimulate a lot of global interaction, a lot of interaction between disciplines, and bring the voice of young scientists into to all of us actually, to make sure that we have a really strong new generation of young scientists. We want outcome measures, so we want in the long run over the next 10 years to make sure we are more reflective of a society, that we're focused on health gain, that we bring disciplines together, we support researchers, and we really do engage with the public. And then I guess there is also the big question of the long-term sustainability of the academy, but equally our environmental sustainability, and net zero, just as with you, will be a key objective for us. So there's plenty of stuff to get involved in. I haven't given you the sort of classic science talk, but I hope I have given you an idea of where the academy wants to go in the future. I hope people will get involved. It's really important to me to hear from fellows. It's really important to hear from young researchers about how we can help your careers and how you would like to engage with us in the future. So let me leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, it is on behalf of the Institute, it's a real honour to be invited today to give the vote of thanks for this evening's lecture. It's a particular pleasure to have Dayman here, both as a UCL colleague, but also I think as the first female president of the Academy of Medical Sciences. I think as a fellow, I'm lucky enough to be one of the Academy's fellows, and I know how hard the Academy works to really promote health and biomedical research in the UK. It really acts as an independent voice. And I think from today's lecture you can see how impactful and how important, more so in the last 2 years than ever before, the work is, particularly in the light of following the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. I think going forward, it's pretty clear that Dayman will be kept busy, as I think the Academy's focus on trying to engage with and influence government and government policy, as well as engaging with the public and patients, which I don't think any of us realised before the pandemic how critically important that would be. I think this will keep the Academy really busy going forward as we face both known and unknown challenges. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the speakers of today's first, inaugural annual address symposium. It was really exciting to hear so many interesting, new, novel gene and cell therapy approaches and all the research that's going on in the Institute. I'd like to thank Mike, actually, for his now routine or regular roundup of how the success of the Institute, and he always manages to capture the highlights from the entire 8 departments, which is quite, I know he makes particular focus on. And obviously I'd like to thank the organisers both of the symposium and of tonight's annual address for their work, because these things don't run smoothly without their input. So finally, before I close, I'd like to invite you all to join us in the first, I think, drinks celebrating the annual address for the last 2 years. But first of all, invite you to join me in thanking Dayman for such an interesting and thorough lecture. Thank you.